So, ladies and gentlemen, we are grateful for having you again tuned in tonight. As we did promise you that we're going to have guests who will be taking us through various topical issues that affect our world with an objective and a mission of seeking, of bringing solutions to some of the ills that are affecting our world. This program is dubbed Add Your Voice. We are inviting each and every one of you, and we are inviting everybody to add their voice to ills and problems and challenges that we are experiencing everywhere in the world. Particularly, we know that people of the African descent everywhere across the globe are disadvantaged in a given way. They are frustrated and oppressed from time immemorial, and this does not exclude in any way people in the continent. In our countries, we used to have dictators, as we have, ill leaders. In the continent, we have tribalism, we have negative ethnicity, and we have corrupt leaders who are frustrating the every effort of the common man in achieving their objectives and in achieving their dreams. People and the common wananchi might not be able to achieve their full potential courtesy of bad governance and bad leadership that we are experiencing. And so we are inviting you to add your voice on leadership. We are inviting you to add your voice on health matters. We are inviting you to add your voice in environmental issues. This Add Your Voice program is a component of 365 days of civic engagement program, under which CAV has a vision of increased public participation, expanded civil society space, stronger community capacities, and resilience combined with good governance and human rights that leads to transformative change and enhanced mitigation capacity for women and the youth to gain a voice, the ability to influence, the power to negotiate, and know their constitutional provision for access to information to effectively participate in the process of civic governance and leadership. In this, we do by training, sensitizing, and organizing communities for action through effective tools of public participation with focus to agribusiness as a component of economic empowerment of the people living in rural areas and in urban areas across the country. Joining us in this program is also an organization named EDFU Foundation, who is coming out as a partner and as a collaborator based in the United States of America. EDFU Foundation is an indigenous non-profit or non-governmental organization with consultative status within the United Nations. The organization views structural violence as a public health issue and as a worldwide crisis for not just indigenous people, but for all human beings. The organization is dedicated to public health and progress of human families across the world. And so today, joining us is Mr. Sheldon Williams, the CEO and founder of Sheldon Foundation. Mr. Sheldon, kindly say hi and hello to your people as you give an opening remark.
Hey, hello and peace and blessings, greetings to everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this discussion. And we at the EDFU Foundation are extremely glad to be able to communicate and dialogue with our family all throughout the diaspora.
Thank you so much. Your voice is a little shaky. It's kind of, I don't know whether it's
okay. Let me see. Can you hear me a little better now? Let me turn the volume.
Yeah, it's more better. That way it's there. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, I would like to thank you for inviting me to participate and be able to dialogue with our family throughout the diaspora. Africans are glad to be here, and we're looking forward to coming up with solutions to solve the issues that plague our community worldwide.
All right, thank you so much. We have Mr. Andrew Williams, president of 5 Points Youth Foundation, though I cannot see him on is there. We have Ambassador Andrew Williams, the president of 5 Points Youth Foundation. Ambassador Andrew is a very well versed and connected person, a person whom you would always want to just be around and have conversation with. Andrew Williams, could you just give your opening remarks as you introduce yourself?
Greetings, everyone. How are you today? Joseph, there's a lot of noise. Can everyone that's not speaking put themselves on mute, please? It's so good to be here with you. And if I could share my screen, I would also like to let people know that we are right now today, we on June 14th of 2020, we are about to enter the most important election ever here in the United States of America. We believe that your work in Kenya with the 365 days of civic engagement can be a model that we can follow here in the United States. So Joseph, we thank you so very much for your leadership in this area and allowing us to bring to your audience a little background about why this week we're in now of June 14th, leading up to June 19th, is so important to those Africans born here in the United States and those who have visited. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And also we have our lady, our coordinator, Ms. Halima Sheikh. Ms. Halima, would you take the pleasure just to introduce yourself? Ms. Halima, also my co-host for today's function. Unmute.
Thank you very much, Josephat. Thank you very much, Mr. William and Sheldon, to accept our invite. I'm very happy that we are viewing some very sensitive part of the program. Have a nice evening. I will be starting the show now. Thank you. Josephat.
I'm muted, sorry. Thank you so much for that well round of introduction that we've collectively done. Now, just straight to the point of the business that brings us here tonight. We all know of slave trade and the impact that slave trade business did to Africa, to the continent, and to the world. In connection to this, we are going to start by just looking at the Juneteenth, but let me give a little background as to this effect. Now, invasion of slave trade in Africa began way back in the 15th century when the Portugal and the European kingdoms came to Africa and started buying Africans as items. Africans were branded just the same way animals are branded or marked. These people, our ancestors, were owned like items. They were treated like objects and tools. They were deprived of dignity, and they were used as means to an end. In essence, our ancestors who were picked from the continent to Europe and to the Americas were reduced to the levels of better a donkey. They were mishandled and mistreated. slave trade came to an end, and it was abolished on 25th March, the year 1907, after the grueling agitation of the likes of Benjamin Rush, who abandoned his business to fight slavery. They were also joined by the likes of William Lloyd Garrison, Frederick Douglass, Harriet, among other Quakers. These people and the Africans who agitated against slavery, we remember them to date. But the abolition of slave trade was not willingly given to Africans or people of the African descent. And the traces of slavery, even to date, we can still feel the impact of the same. I want to welcome Ambassador Williams to share with us a green light about the past experiences of the slaveries, and bring about and also share with us about the Kwanzaa and the Juneteenth that we are preparing to celebrate. Of course, the Juneteenth is a concept that is completely new to our audience, and is completely new in the country. Welcome, sir.
Hey, thank you, Joseph. I appreciate that. If you don't mind, Andrew, I'll just kick it off, and I'm gonna pass Kwanzaa, that explanation over. I'm sorry, the Kwanzaa Accords and the Juneteenth explanation over to you. But I do want to just kind of hit home on some things that Joseph had said. There were over 100 million people of African descent kidnapped from the continent, and I think and slavery is an evil and unforgivable act. And I think a lot of people fail to realize that when they kidnapped these 100 million Africans, they didn't just kidnap people who had no skills or who had no intelligence. A lot of the people that they kidnapped actually had skills, right? So in the early colonies, the colonists did not know how to plant rice or harvest a lot of agriculture that was predominant on Eastern Seaboard, where the 13 colonies were. So what they did is they kidnapped or they tricked a lot of African descendants by asking them to come over and work kind of as an indentured servitude, right? And then once they learned the skills from those indigenous Africans that were here in the Americas, teaching them how to till the land and how to produce agriculture, even crops such as cotton, rice, corn. Then they were tricked, and they transformed this thing of indentured servitude into chattel slavery. And so then what you have is a system that treated people less than human. There's a good book to get. It's called The Foodie's Guide to Capitalism. It kind of lays out, right, and how people were tricked and duped into utilizing their skills to help the colonies in order for them to prosper. Since the doctrine of discovery, the global economy has benefited from indigenous resources, secret items, labor, and this is something that goes back to before Columbus. And so we therefore need to make sure it's addressed. And so that's just one point I want to get across about the whole slavery, and the reason that we at EDFU Foundation feel that, intergenerational trauma is a worldwide issue for not just indigenous Africans in America, but all indigenous people throughout the world. So I'll kick it over to you, Josephat and Andrew, to talk about Juneteenth and how that plays into our whole program of making sure that everyone has equal rights and is treated in a humane fashion.
Yes, Andrew, we can hear you share with us about the Juneteenth, and also we'd love to get the insights of the Kwanzaa. Thank you.
Josephat, can you hear me?
Andrew, we can hear
I
you.
can,
Oh,
I can
wonderful.
hear you clearly.
Wonderful. I'd like to make sure you know that Charles D. Sharp is also on the panel. I'm having challenges with my internet connection, but so Charles D. Sharp, if you could unmute yourself and introduce yourself, I would really appreciate that.
Yeah, he came, then he left. He's not in.
Not hearing Charles. I'll continue. I was blessed to be here because, well, in the first place, I did meet you, Josephat, through our relationships with our mutual acquaintances, such as Dewey Boyd. But it was actually Dewey Boyd that I had an opportunity to introduce through Charles Sharp to meet the ambassador Chihumbari Kwao some years ago. So Charles D. Sharp is the CEO of the Black Emergency Managers Association. I'm proud that I am a lifetime member of that organization. That's very important to everything we're talking about here now today, because when we consider our voting rights and our cultural, the cultural value that we have, you have to understand, Josephat, and those people in Kenya and around the world, that what you are experiencing in your countries sometimes can only be a small example of what your brothers and cousins and sisters have been experiencing here in the United States of America for not just the last 401 years, but even today. So we have special days in our calendar that are important to us that I was surprised, perhaps not so, that Josephat knew nothing about Kwanzaa, which is a word. He did recognize, of course, the word because it means fruits or first fruits, but he was not aware that it had any more significance. It does here in the United States have a major significance to those people in the African American community in particular. It was during 1965 and 66 when an organization here that was founded called the US Organization, just after the 1965 riots, the Watts riots, that led to this effort on the part of activists to claim and have a cultural tradition that was important to the Pan-African movement. You can, in fact, easily Google Kwanzaa with 2 A's to find that history out. What we are pleased to bring you now, however, is the linkage between Kwanzaa and what will be celebrated very soon in the next few days as Juneteenth. Juneteenth is itself relevant to the transatlantic slave trade, whereas in the United Kingdom, the slavery was abolished in the early 1800s. It was only in 1863 that the Emancipation Proclamation was enacted by Abraham Lincoln. However, it took another year and a half, actually 2 years and a half, to June 19th of 1865, when the last slaves were announced in Texas. So with that, our intent is to take this opportunity this year in 2020. Please remember, it was August 25th of 2019 that brought in the 400th anniversary of the first arrivals of those Africans from the Kwanzaa River area of Angola to the shores of the what is now the United States of America. What few people know is that of the 20 odd Africans that were indentured servants because slavery did not exist until 1861. 20 and odd were delivered to Point Comfort in Hampton, Virginia, but the others were diverted to the country of Bermuda. It is in Bermuda in 2012 that a native Bermudian and I developed a social contract called the Kwanzaa Accord. Rather than celebrate the 7 principles of Kwanzaa 1 week every year between January 26th between December 26th, January the 1st of next year, we committed ourselves to celebrate the 7 principles of Kwanzaa every day of the week, so that every Sunday, just like today, we would celebrate Umoja. So then this is again another reason why I'm so excited to be a part of this. But here's the thing. Just as Josephat, you know, that Sheldon and I participated in Africa Week 2020, we had 120 hours of celebration of an event that's normally only recognized one day, which is Africa Day, May 25th. This time, we are committed.
Sorry, that is unfortunate. I think he did indicate that he has bad internet. And,
yeah, so
we're hoping that he's going to come back.
Yeah, Josephat, if I could just finish his statement, because I know where he was going with that. So we're committed to having 10 days of Juneteenth, starting June 19th until June 28th. And that will be live on streaming live on EDFU Foundation's website on Facebook. We have many different panels where people can come and learn about not just Juneteenth, but the issues that are plaguing not just our community, but the human family. And we're not just having panels to discuss these items, but we'll also be presenting solutions. So please check out EDFU Foundation at facebook.com. There's an events page for it, the 10 days of Juneteenth. If you Google it, I'm sure you'll find it. If you're interested in participating or being a part of it in any way, please email us or contact us at EDFU. So I think that's kind of where he was going with it. And we're building towards a summer of connectography where we will make virtual platforms available to our community throughout the diaspora so that we can solve issues in our community. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And in connection to the Juneteenth, I'm glad that you mentioned that it will involve different participants. We'll take this opportunity to maybe welcome people from the continent, from our circles, those who would love to participate. How do they participate in the Juneteenth event?
Yeah, definitely. If they'd like to participate, they should send an email to edfufoundation@gmail.com or hit us up on Facebook at the event page, 10 Days of Juneteenth. And then let us know how they'd like to participate. We'd love for everyone to tune into the programs that we're having. Like I said, from June 19th through June 28th, we have some really great programs with the Universal Hip Hop Museum. We have the Martin Luther King Jr. Freedom Center out of Oakland, which is sponsored by Congresswoman Barbara Lee. We have a whole host of great programs. The International Institute of Family Development with the 5-point policing plan on how to stop police brutality. So please join us, tune in, and we appreciate the support. Also, I would like to mention that, you know, Andrew talked about the first slaves that came to America. I'd like people to realize and recognize, and he also spoke about Bermuda. Like I said, there are over 100 million, close to 600 million people of African descent in the Western Hemisphere, with the majority of those being in Brazil, right? So our Brazilian brothers and sisters, we have Afro-Hondurans, Afro-Nicaraguans, anywhere in the Western Hemisphere that there's a country, there are people of African descent there. And of course, we know about the great contributions of the Caribbean and in Canada. So we don't want everyone to think that the sole focus is on the USA. However, us in the USA are leading the charge to address these issues especially in light of the certain circumstances that have been taking place thus far. I see that you have Charles Sharp here from Black Emergency Managers Association. I'd love to hear how they're addressing these issues from their standpoint.
All right. Thank you so much for addressing that. We have a new guest. Just before I bring him forth, let me give shout out to our people who are commenting on following this conversation. We have Jetani Tolosa, who is a CAV volunteer. Thank you so much, and we shall be your views that you expressed there. We have Viola, one of our dear partners from the United States, and also the founder for International Institute for Family Development, who has also extended a hand to accommodate our volunteers in an internship program. We have Franco Petro following us from South Africa, Cape Town. We have Collins Mureithi. We are glad to have you, sir. We have teacher a senior volunteer with CAV. We're going to read out the ideas, some of the ideas and concerns that you are bringing forth. Of course, we have Mr. Andrew at the chat room. Perhaps he will be joining us. With that, Mr. Charles, the chair of BEMA International. Would you kindly just introduce yourself and tell us a little about you and a little about BEMA International before we move to the next line of conversation? Yes. It's a chance for you there. Could it be network problem? Because we are not able to hear you, sir.
Yeah, his internet seems a little choppy. He's breaking up.
That is seriously breaking. All right. Maybe as we are waiting for him to, if he will be able to connect, we'll be glad to have him here. But now, voting and voter education is one of the greatest things that any civically responsible citizen should get engaged with. And all governments in a democratic system are established through the ballot. Sadly enough, we have a myriad of challenges that we experience with the voting processes. If not voter apathy, then it is negative ethnicity. I would wish my co-host, Madam Halima Sheikh, to take us through with the conversation on voter education as we envisage and as we warm up to voter mobilization under the 365 days of civic engagement here in Kenya, and also with together in our partnership with the EDFU Foundation in the United States of America. So I welcome you, Lima. Take us through this conversation. Welcome. Unmute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Josephat. On voters' education in Kenya, voting is an essential mechanism for controlling public administration and is a fundamental condition for democracy. Elections are the main form of virtual accountability, when we talk in Kenya, allowing citizens to evaluate the government performance. But what happened in the real situation? Let us talk in the picture of Kenya now. In the real situation, Kenya, in voting, it has impact. Let's look on socio-economic development impact in Kenya. It affects so much because elections are done in tribal basis. It's so unfortunately that people are electing on tribal basis. It's not that you are practicing the voting right, it is who you know. And the larger tribe that you are coming from, that's the Kenya elections are done like that. When we talk about the negative on ethnicity, we all know that there's an impact because there's no accountability. When you vote for your so and so, you are coming from tribal A, tribal B, that you cannot question, there's no transparency, there's no accountability in that voting exercise. So it has so much impact in economical basis or socio-economic development on there. If you look in the household basis, the poverty index in Kenya is so high. Due to that, there's no accountability, there's no disintegration of the power, disintegration or sensitization to the community level is zero. Again, when you vote on races or ethnicity basis, you cannot talk of transparency and accountability, because when I get hold of somebody like community A, tribe B will account me on racist base because they defend their man. So there's no accountability, sensitization of the community. So I don't know. My question is now, how can you overcome? How in Kenya, we don't know how to overcome on this issue. How do we ensure that voting is done objectively? Because it's my worry, if I'm witnessing this after decades, 56 years after independence, that still these tribal lines, people are voting on racism, negativity, ethnicity. How do we ensure that voting is done objectively? That question I'm tossing back to you guys. Secondly, what are some of the voting challenges experienced on Africa or America? The voting challenges, one, there's no accountability and there's no hold of accountability in that. If I have voted on tribal line, I cannot trace or account on that MP, or let's say that member of parliament. So there's no objectivity of voting practicing. Again, we talked about the essential mechanism of controlling public administration. We cannot adhere to the public administration and account. The member of parliament cannot account or dare, because he's talking about he's coming from the larger part of the ethnicity or tribal line that nobody can dare hold on his shirt. So my question is still adheres. How can you objectively hold that? Or can we objectively rule out this tribal issue or racism issue and elect about merit and objectivity, and we can hold this member of parliament or a leader, the skill of leadership? Let's vote on that. Thank you very much. Josephat, to you.
Right, thank you so much for that great input. You've talked about tribalism, and tribalism, I think I would liken it to race in the United States of America. And you've also talked about lack of accountability when as a challenge as to when people do not vote objectively. To that question, the two questions that you've posed, perhaps we'll try to reach out to Mr. Charles Sharp. Again, Mr. Charles, are you there? Can you, is your internet okay right now? I think Mr. Charles's internet is not very good. So we'll get to you, Mr. Sheldon. Alima has raised issues that really hinder people from voting objectively. Among them that he has talked of is tribalism, and tribalism here in Kenya would liken it to race. people maybe consider their races or their ethnic groupings.
No, yeah, Joseph, I totally agree. I think tribalism is akin to tribalism. Essentially, is ethnocentrism or xenophobia, right? So it's akin to racism in a different form. So when you there's nothing wrong with being proud of your tribe and your culture, but when you utilize those feelings of pride to disenfranchise or to oppress other people, that's when it becomes xenophobia. So I totally agree with what you're both saying. And I think there needs to be a change of mindset that, hey, just because someone's in your tribe does not mean that they're 100% correct or that they're perfect or that you can't trust or work with someone outside of your tribe. Because, diversity is how humans were able to evolve to become pretty much the stewards of planet Earth, right? We became, to a certain standpoint, of every other living being on the planet because we evolved, and we only evolved through diversity, right? So if you're not utilizing every resource in your community, in your, in your community, then you're holding yourself back. So I agree.
All right. Now, how can we go about changing people's mindset and educating? How do we do this to ensure that people become objective in terms of voting?
Yeah, so I think education is really key, and I'm sure Andrew will back me up on this. This is why here in America, and this is one of the reasons we're here as well, is we're starting a voter education, voter preparedness, right? So you need to educate people about the issues. You need to educate people about who are the people running for the office. What is it that we expect them to do once they get into the office? And you need to have frank discussions and ask them hard questions about, what do you plan to do once you get in office? And if they don't do that, then you need to make sure that you hold them accountable. People who are already in office, you need to have those same discussions with them, and then also start preparing ways to move them out of office with new candidates, right? So I think that's one way you do it. You have to educate. And people, civic engagement is very important. You have to really, sorry, I didn't mean to. So yeah, civic engagement is really important. Like, freedom is not free. You have to participate as a citizen of whatever community you are a part of. It doesn't require 24/7 effort, but it does require you participating. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I love the aspect that, and I'm taking this as a quote, that freedom is not free. Freedom is not free, and we got to participate in this process. Sir Andrew Williams, we would love to hear your thoughts. Ms. Dima just mentioned that one of the key impacts or negative impacts to the voting process is a lack of accountability and negative ethnicity and tribalism. So the question that she posed, how do we handle this? How do we ensure that people vote objectively vote in the continent and in the United States of America?
Well, if I may, I am having challenges, but I think I heard you ask about the need for transparency and also the anti-corruption of the politicians. I think it's important, Josephat, that we understand these are not issues limited to either Kenya or to the United States. It's the global issue, and just as education is so important, it is one of the sustainable development goals that the entire world is focusing on. And what you're raising now is a very important issue for us here in the United States. Just as in Africa, 80% of your leaders are 60 years old, 70 years old or older. Here in the United States, many of our politicians have been in office 10 years, 20 years, 30 years in the same position, not on a national scale, but on a local scale. So we have the same challenges of holding accountable the elected officers. So that's why I admire so much your work, because you have to educate the people who are voting, but then you have to empower them to hold accountable the people that they actually put into office.
you, and thank you so much for that input. I don't know if Mr. Charles, are you there? We would love to hear from you. I understand, I think you have some internet problem.
Can you hear me now?
Very well. We can clearly hear you. Thank you, sound well.
Okay, sorry about that. You know, education is the key to everything. A lot of individuals here in the U.S. Don't really understand that those on the continent, they have to pay to go to school. At all levels, they have to pay. And that's something here we have public education. And there are so many things involved in the system. And I was listening to you as I was trying to get all this set up on a different device, you know, discuss voting. And according to, you know, your religious preference or whatever, you know, and there was a problem. One of the key things, I'm going to bring this up, after the Civil War, which Andrew mentioned earlier, the Republicans were the ones that, and I'm not getting into politics, but just a thought. The Republicans were the one that won charge, were running the country, the US, when the Civil War took place. And it really was about money. It wasn't about slavery. It was about money and control. And now, so the Democrats were the ones that were against the abolition of slavery. And now it has shifted. The Democrats are all for civil rights and everything. And something you said that was the key, that in the South, when blacks were able to vote, a little bit after the war, the Civil War here, they were Republicans. No, they had to vote Democrats. Why? Because they had to register and everyone knew who they were. So then it started to shift a little later on. After the Civil War, you had a lot of blacks that were in political power. They had political positions at the state and federal level. Then it started to shift where the other group, the rebels, shifted to the Republican Party and not the Democratic Party. But the blacks were already in the Democratic Party, and we've stayed there since then. So there's a lot of history tied into what we do. And that's something you really have to look at. The power at the local level is the key to changing everything. And the national will correspond to what the local levels are saying in your districts, your regions, whatever in the country that you're in on the continent. They have to shift because the individual, the community has the power. And that's the key we all have to really be aware of. The community has the power. COVID-19, we started to see a lot of individuals in the community come together. During Ebola crisis, Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia, the community came into play. They really didn't get resolved until the community got involved in Liberia to help with those coming from the outside in. And that's the key, but the community has to take an active role. Education and awareness is the key. The internet has brought us all together. There's a lot of free education out here for us all. And that we have to really, really look at, get that education and awareness out there. We're starting to talk more. With this conversation we have right now had taken place if COVID-19 didn't occur. There are some pluses and minuses to both. But what is one of the good things about this? We're coming together even more using the technology at our disposal. And I just wanted to get that out there. But I really didn't explain what Beam is about or who I am. And I don't want to take up your time, but I can do that a little later or if you want me to continue on.
We would appreciate if you could continue and just introduce yourself. It's important that the audience also know whom they are talking to.
Okay. Well, my name is Charles. I'm the chairman and CEO of the Black Emergency International. And I'm a Cornell University Climate Fellow because climate change is really a vital part that we have to look at within our communities of color, those vulnerable communities. We're an association of Homeland Security and emergency management professionals. That's our main base. We get individuals into this profession. We originally started out in the US, but it's now global. We have to get individuals into this profession. And if Homeland Security is not within as an industry, Homeland Security is an industry, but emergency management is a profession. And that we want to get more professional people into that globally. Africa, US, Caribbean, globally, wherever the Black diaspora is. We took an added step when we formed the association to say that we don't want to separate ourselves from our communities. We opened up our membership to members of the community. That concept of whole community is the key, because we saw the disparity. Who was greatly more affected? Black, Latinx, communities of color. Vulnerable communities were being excluded when disasters occur. So we wanted to get that education and awareness and training out there to the community, at the community level, to have them identify with us, to say, we're not exclusive, we're all inclusive. That any individual in a community, an individual, a family, faith-based organization, nonprofit, a business, small business, big business, they're all part of the whole community. They can be members of our association to get that information out there. COVID-19 and disasters strike, they strike everyone in the community. And everyone in the community needs to be involved to rebuild. That also goes with climate change. Everyone needs to be involved. In the US, we don't experience climate change as much as those on the continent in Africa, really. And that information has to be geared towards everyone. Hey, this is happening in this community. Look how they're addressing that issue. Myself, I've been doing disaster emergency management really for over 40 years, even when I was in high school. So I'm not as young as I look, but I also served in the military in emergency management. I was an inspector general. So I inspected active duty, reserve, and guard bases for emergency management, the emergency management component. And it was either approval or disapproval if they were combat ready or able to address disasters in their bases or in their communities. So I always look at the systems approach. What is in correct it? Sometimes the process is fine, but the procedures are fine. It's the process and how it's allocated. It's not functioning correctly. People are not being involved. They're being excluded. And you have to look at that. You have to look at that. You know, what are the vulnerable populations that aren't being involved when a shelter is open? Distribution of PPE equipment. You always look at that from the start. And that's what I look at and what should be addressed in our communities. So it's a very complex feature. We have members that are in law enforcement, fire and emergency management. We have members in all the other critical infrastructure sectors. There's 16 that are designated. That's energy, nuclear power, health and human service. Even within the CDC here in the US, we even help create the Africa Emergency Managers Association to help address that issue on the continent. Here is an association that the members of Africa on the continent can identify with. The 5 regions. Now, here's something to work with. Let's work with this. Let's start making sure that every nation, the over 50 nations on the continent, you're starting to come together and address your issues, not someone coming in from outside. What's happening at your local level that you have to address? Because all disasters really are local. They're local. There are local disasters that have to be addressed and resolved by the people there. So I just wanted to get that in. Still there?
I don't know if you can hear me, Charles. I'm still here.
Oh, okay. Hey, Sheldon, it's good. I finally get the opportunity to meet you. I didn't meet you at the United Nations, UNESCO.
Exactly. It's nice to meet you too.
Josephat,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, look, in the chat, I put in 365 days of civic engagement. I'd like Charles to review that. I'd like for you to join the Black Emergency Managers Association. I'd like you to establish a relationship with BEMA to make sure that emergency management is part of what you do in Kenya and throughout all the other countries where you're involved. But please tell us, how many countries are you involved with this voter education process? Explain to us in the audience what you are doing right now for civic engagement, please.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. Now, 365 Days of Civic Engagement is a program that is primarily meant to civically empower the citizens to gain voice and access to information and be involved in every process of governance. Currently, we are actively engaging with this program in Kenya, and also we have a reach in 18 other African countries. Just but to mention a few: South Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, Uganda, Tanzania, Cameroon, majorly the Anglophone, the Northern Cameroon. We have Congo, and we have Angola, just but to mention. These are countries that we have our volunteers in, and they are currently involved in data collection, that is research on that would inform our entry to those countries. And as well, those volunteers are organizing communities at the very grassroots levels. The key approach that we are taking with the 365 days of civic engagement is the bottom-up approach, where we would wish to have people educated at the grassroots levels, because we know unless people are educated and empowered and thoroughly sensitized from the grassroots levels, then it will be very, very difficult to make an impact at the apex or at the nation levels. So our volunteers are people who are from their rural communities. They volunteer their time. They donate their time to educate and sensitize our people across the continent primarily. I believe that is so brief enough to capture what you asked, Ambassador Andrew.
Yes, that is brief enough. But what I would ask, if you would work with Charles Sharp to include in your 365 days of civic engagement the Black Emergency Managers Association plan of action, so that in all these countries, we can also empower the communities to protect themselves against all these elements. Charles Sharp is also a member of the United Nations Global Compact. I should say the Black Emergency Managers Association is. Luckily, the 5 Points Youth Foundation is also in the United Nations Global Compact. It's important you understand that Kofi Annan in 2000 launched the Global Compact to hold accountable the major multinational corporations that were doing business in those areas. But he later added a principle for anti-corruption and transparency, which is what you're actually doing. So I would encourage you both to umbrella this under a collaboration that the EDFU Foundation can then find grants and support for, so that we can do the work through Africa, but also here in the United States. So are you open to collaborating with the Black Emergency Managers Association and the EDFU Foundation and 5 Points to do that?
Very, very well. Actually, when he finished speaking, while I was muted, I was saying that Ambassador Andrew would put us in contact or in touch, so that we can forge a way and define a way in which we are going to work. So collaboration and partnership is one of the things that we are very, very much open to, and we would love to engage with him. Yes, Halima.
In fact, that is a marvelous contribution from Charles, and I'm happy that we can adjust ourselves through that, because we cover the grassroots community about the activity, voter activity, educations, about agricultural level issues, sensitization, and educational level. So I'm happy to meet Charles, and I think we will talk more on our online. Thank you very much.
Oh,
Can I just add one more thing?
Now, as we are coming, yes, please.
Can I just add one more thing? One more thing about what we're looking at. Sure, I'm sorry. I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Yes, Charles.
One more thing I wanted to add, that from now 2020 on, the main thing is job development, especially youth job development. What are we going to do with our youth who aren't working? So that's one of the things doing at the local level, the grants opportunity that we mentioned for our members and others, is to create jobs at the local level, to address those issues at the local level. And that's even here in DC, in the US, Canada, Caribbean. What a job development, future job development. And that's it. I just wanted to get that.
Great. And now, if you don't mind, we can have another. You mute? We could have another session with you in the course of the week. I believe we can arrange on this a forum with you where we'll be delving on your approaches and just sharing with us on how we can work, how we'll be working together, and the approaches that you are taking in expanding and creating, focusing on job creation at the grassroots level. Perhaps I believe you can be open to that conversation, sir?
Yes, yes.
All right. We'll arrange with that. Yes, Ambassador?
I would ask that you make clear that we will be continuing these weekly events on every Tuesday, coming forth about the voter engagement throughout Kenya. And I'd like for Sheldon Williams to talk about the commitment that we've made here with the Universal Hip Hop Museum to focus on voter registration and education here in the United States. So this would be an opportunity we can demonstrate to the world that the issues that we're addressing here together have a global impact. So perhaps Sheldon could explain to the community why we're engaged with this voter education program, and then how we can work together to make this happen. Sheldon Williams, are you able to reply?
Yeah, definitely. So voter preparedness, voter education is extremely important, as we've mentioned in the past. And I'm just going to ask, if you're not speaking, if you could mute your mic, because I do hear some background noise. Civic engagement is supremely important, whether you're here in America or you're in Kenya or anywhere in the diaspora. It's like Josephat enjoyed my statement, which is not new, but freedom isn't free. If you're going to participate, every citizen needs to participate in their government's process. So it's very important that you educate yourself on who your elected officials are, who is up for election, what measures are up for election, and how they affect you. So one of the things that we're endeavoring to do here, working with the 5 Points Youth Foundation as EDFU and the Universal Hip Hop Museum, and amongst others, is we're trying to educate the people, and the Martin Luther King Jr. Freedom Center. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to forget them. We're trying to educate young people on how it is that they can actively engage and move some of these people who are stagnant, who are not doing anything for the community, not doing anything for our government, our republics, what have you, wherever you may be, how to move them out of office and get people in, like Ilhan Omar, AOC, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, how to get people who are actually going to do things to proactively change the situation that we're currently in and move us towards a future that we can all be proud of and engage in, and that's basically it. So yeah, we would love to work with you. Every Sunday we're going to be engaging the community in ways to do this. If right now in America, especially, I don't know how it goes in the diaspora in Kenya, but COVID-19 is a real thing. So that right now in America, there's a debate on how we will do our voting. There's been some disastrous effects from like actually having to go to the polls. And so is it that we're gonna have to go to mail-in voting? So what will we do? EDFU Foundation, as an ECOSOC United Nations entity, will be calling on a special rapporteur to on voting rights to come maybe oversee or somehow intervene and to make sure that we have free and fair elections. And we're willing to do that for any organizations. We're not the only organization out here that would do that, but I think that's an important thing, right? If you're gonna take the time to be civically engaged, you need to make sure that your vote counts.
And if I just may add, it was in Ferguson, Missouri, 6 years ago, when this Ferguson unrest unfolded around the world, that so many people now feel like we're in a bookend of that. But also, back then, there were no city council members that were Black. Now they've just elected the first Black mayor of Ferguson. That took 6 years, but it did take a concerted, ongoing effort. So don't expect change overnight, because these things that are in place have happened over decades or even centuries. But you have to go into this with a long-term commitment, is my point.
So much for the input. As we are coming to an end, and I believe Halima will be taking us to at the closing. That is the problems identified and the way forward. So after this, Halima will be taking us through that. But first, let me sample a few of the comments that we are getting from our audience. We have Mr. Jatani Tolosa, who is our member. He says that I agree with Ambassador Andrew that weekly sessions to demonstrate to us how they are doing it in the US, which will in turn help us acquire requisite skills to educate our people to be proactive. Thank you so much, Mr. Jatani, for that. We have Tichi Casey. Her name is Margaret Udo. She says that the idea of voting and how it impacts on governance and social justice is that over and over. We don't have free and fair elections. Somehow, the people on the ballot are poached and supported to campaign. A lot of money is spent in buying voters at the expense of fairness. We end up with corrupt people in positions of leadership. We have people who fund such goons, unfortunately. Casey is saying that we have a lot of voter buying. People who are buying are poached and paid money, and this leads to corruption, corrupt people in the positions. Perhaps we can get an input in that with one of our panelists. We have another comment here by Jagani still. He says that, of course, voting has impact on governance, either negatively or positively. The voter is the ultimate director of how the impact looks like. When the voter chooses not to reason beyond ethnic or race or anything that has attached to them, the impact will be a suppression field governance. Opposite is true. Unfortunately, when in modern society, a voter is not moved by issues that affect the mass. This is despite concerted advocacy. I believe, moreover, of civic education has to relook. I hope we can make sense of that. But let me make certain observations here. In Kenya, we have typical examples that we can give about voter apathy. In voter apathy, this is a deliberate will, of not to vote. And people, sometimes we construct in our minds that those who do not vote are people who are ignorant in the villages, or people who are not schooled. Unfortunately, we've had cases of the affluent people who deliberately do not vote. For example, we have a case of a very brilliant young lady, a lawyer, a senior counsel, a senior lawyer, who did not vote. And this we did realize when she wanted to vie after the death of her father. But mark you this, when we had a disputed elections in 2013, she really represented the opposition, whose elections were rigged out. Now, this person did not vote. And we take it that this is a clear representation of the affluent class who do not vote, the most educated people who take voting for granted. Recently, we also had another case of a person who wanted to vie in a by-election, a great footballer, McDonald Mariga. The person only registered to vote when he wanted to vie in a by-election. That is to say that this person has not been voting and did not even vote in the previous election. Now, these are affluent people, these are very educated people, these are very informed people. And we would love to say that when we don't vote, we give room for poor health care. And in Africa, it is always seen that whenever our leaders are sick, especially those in the political class, whenever they are sick, they are flown out of the country to America, to England, to China, or to India to seek medical attention, while ignoring blatantly the health facilities that they are building at home. So lack of voting or voter apathy gives rise to poor healthcare system. It also gives rise to underfunded schools. In Africa and in Kenya, we have two levels of schools. We have public schools, then actually three levels. We have public schools where nobody loves to take their kids to because the quality of education there is poor. It is free education and free of knowledge indeed. Then we have private schools where the middle class flock their kids to. And then we have international schools. We have international schools whose curriculum is completely different from the curriculum that we have here in Kenya. And so voting without thinking gives rise to underfunded schools and poor education. And as Malcolm X said, that when there is poor education, it breeds poor performance. It brings to no access to proper jobs when you attend these poor schools. So this lack of voting or voting without thinking gives us such negative impact. We have lack of opportunities. When you are poor, you cannot trade with the government. You cannot do any meaningful business because we have thousands and thousands of licenses that you are required to pay before you can launch into any given trade, especially in the country where I'm coming from. Of course, lack of voting gives rise to poor in the mind who are making our policies. It gives rise to police brutality. In the US, we just recently came to realize and to know that all of us, most of our people in Africa, they are aspiring to go to the US because it is branded as the land of opportunities, the land of gold. But of late, we did realize that it is a land of oppression. It is the land that lacks dignity, that, I don't know how to describe it. So lack of voting gives rise to police brutality. I think that we are experiencing even here in the continent. Poverty, diseases, and ill health. Malaria kills 11 million children and women every year in Africa. More than what coronavirus is doing to the continent. But it is never publicized because it affects only poor people, and those whom we elect are not affected, therefore they are not concerned of us. Africa has 60% of the arable land that can feed the entire universe. But we have hunger in the continent. Our people are dying day in, day out. And this is despite of the arable land, the productive land that we have. Statistically, 60% of those arable lands are in the hands of powerful politicians, powerful people in the government, and big corporations of which politicians have shares in. 60% of this land remain until they are not cultivated. They are allowing fallow because they are owned by people who are corrupt, who steals extra resources from the public coffers. So lack of voting gives rise to every negative thing that we can experience. And so I want Alima to take us to the next level on looking at the way forward. Way forward. Where do we move to from here? Alima, back to you.
Thank you, Josephat. Thank you very much. You have elaborated and touched in a very sensitive points. Like in Kenya, we are encountering bribery when it comes to election. And I think the way forward, I still stand on the question of how can we ensure that voting is done objectively? Where can we chip in and descend this education to the grassroots level so that the mama who is in Mashinani who know the rights of voting and the sensitivity of holding the leaders on accountable. Because in the Mashinani level, if I see on the grassroots level, people don't understand that this is their right. Sometimes the poverty index in the grassroots level is high, so that they only see that electoral positions are providing them income to their basic need. When election is done, many corrupt people come out and chip in a lot of briberies to the voters so that they confuse them and give them a lot of money so that they can vote for on their rights too. Unless we have to ask ourselves, do our community have enough education, enough sensitization about voter issue? Do they have the enlightenment or the bright light of the side that they can hold accountable to the leaders? Stop taking the bribe so that they hold know their right, that they can is their right to vote whoever they want. To conclude this, you mentioned about lack of voting or opportunity, or there's not transparency in it. When it comes to youth level, many youths are jobless in Kenya. So when you just take a briefcase bagged of money, there's a lot of money in that briefcase. There's no job in the country. The youths just land of your tricks so that they can take the bribe and vote for you on your honor. So it is upon us now tonight that we are in here in this panel. How can we descend this to the grassroots? How can we sensitize and create awareness to the grassroots level that this is their right in the article of the constitution in Kenya, that they should deny the bribe and vote in a sensible way? Thank you. I think that's my way forward. Thank you, Joseph, to you.
Thank you so much. And I can see Mr. Charles just mentioned. Mr. Charles just mentioned in the comment section here that corruption is a global issue. Votes are purchased here in the United States. This is so new. Would you speak to this effect, Mr. Charles? Voter buying in the United States.
I couldn't hear the question again. I'm trying to read it on the chat.
You mentioned that corruption is a global issue and votes are purchased here in the US.
Yes,
would you speak to that effect?
Well,
and how does it?
When you look at the political action community committees that are out here that represent the corporate entity, and one of the things we emphasize is when you look at the community imperative, and if you've studied businesses, there are imperatives. They're key things, primary goals. The imperative, we look at that as number one. That should be above the financial imperative and the corporate imperative. They are parts of the community. When COVID-19 struck, it was the first thing that was hit, the financial community, the stock markets. So when you look at even voting, you have to look at what are your officials? Where do they come from? Are they representing the corporate structure, whether international or local, or are they representing the community? Your leaders are at the lowest level in your community. Those who are there getting the job done with the least financial support, but they still represent the community. So that local level is the key to everything. It's the key to everything, the local. And you have to have monitoring and evaluation all along the line from the local lowest grassroots level up to the top. We'll know who's representing us by what they do. Actions speak louder than words.
Mr. Chan,
Thank you so much. Yes.
To emphasize on what Charles has told us, when we look up, there was this research we took about the COVID-19. When we are talking of the normal Mwananchi, the normal grassroots citizen, he don't know about anything COVID-19 because the media have covered a lot of COVID-19. But the grassroots people are dying out of poverty. There was a lot of floods that in the Tana River, the country. Nobody was airing this, you see, because the interest of the normal citizen was not covered. Yes, but
Yes. Thank you so much. I'm just getting greater insights here and greater revelations that I didn't know. As you rightly said, I totally agree with you, Halima. And Mr. Ambassador Andrew also is saying that voter apathy is very, very disastrous to the welfare of the community. That he lives in a neighborhood in Los Angeles with 8% of voter turnout. So this is why I'm saying that you know, the issues that we are facing here, they are faced everywhere. And what affects other people in the US, there are also our struggles there. So there is great need that we work together as a people to ensure that everybody, people of the African descent, are well represented. And this representation cannot be achieved if we are not proactive in in taking our civic responsibility first by voting and following our votes thereafter. Perhaps, Mr. Andrew, you wish to speak to the effect of voter apathy in Los Angeles?
Yes, of course. Here in Los Angeles, I live in what's known as South Central Los Angeles. We have the poorest residents. Only 8% of our eligible voters voted. But there was the most money spent in all of the Los Angeles City Council districts to
Wow, we've just lost him. We've just lost him. Perhaps I'll bring you, Mr. Sheldon, to speak to this effect of voter apathy. It's a crazy thing.
Yeah, so voter apathy is a real thing because a lot of people feel disenfranchised. They feel as though voting isn't going to accomplish anything. Andrew mentioned earlier that it took 6 years for Ferguson to move from the Michael Brown shooting to actually being able to get the first Black man out of Ferguson. But what we can do is we can get small wins, and we can get wins in the short term, I should say. I see Andrew's back, so I don't want to take his time while he's here and his internet's good. So Andrew, please jump in if you're able to. If not, I will continue.
Well, yes, but please continue if I drop out. The point, however, Joseph, is that it is, in fact, corruption that is at the heart of the problem of voter apathy. But your efforts there for civic engagement are lessons we can learn here in the United States. So I hope that we can actually have a memorandum of understanding between EDFU Foundation and CAV-Africa and Black Emergency Managers Association to find ways we can move together. That's really the essence of AFRIKWANZA. As you may know, the word Africa is spelled a C, but that's because of the Europeans. They replaced this C, the K sign, with their C. So this is an attempt to show that we can come together culturally and work together collaboratively throughout the diaspora and worldwide. So that's the outcome. I hope we can actually have a plan of ways to adapt your 365 days of civic engagement for Kenya and Africa here in the United States through the EDFU Foundation, and include an element of the United Nations Global Compact. Again, I'm asking all of my contacts to join our campaign. Right now, there are 10,000 major multinational corporations that are members of the United Nations Global Compact. They only have a few civil society members. So during this International Decade for People of African Descent, and this International Decade of Action on the Sustainable Development Goals, I'm asking that we bring together our efforts so that we can have a voice at the table, and we can be at the table instead of on the menu.
Wow, thank you so very much with that input. Now, as a way forward, looking for the way forward and the follow-up, we are making a commitment that this program, you will be having voting in November this year, is in the United States, and in Kenya we will be voting in the year 2022, and that is why we have this 2 years program. I would ask Halima, I would appoint Halima to be the coordinator of this collaboration. Every collaboration that is going to come, the collaboration with EDFU Foundation and EMA and Center for Africa Volunteers, Halima would be from my end, and as you adopt the 365 days of civic engagement in the United States, Halima will be helping in coordinating all these activities together with your team. Of course, I'm presently there as we are moving forward. Another commitment in the way forward that we are making is that every Tuesday for 30 minutes or so, or 1 hour, we'll be tracking our progress in this program of voter mobilization and voter sensitization. We believe that with this kind of collaboration, we are going to make a greater impact. I believe that this is a point that we are both agreeing towards.
Yes, and I can also say that every 2 years we have elections here in the United States for the senators and for our Congress people. So it would make a lot of sense for us to continue, not just through 2020, but through 2022, along with your efforts there.
Wow, thank you so much. That is very important. That is very important for us and for the entire team. Yes, we have Charles. Your hand up. Yes, sir.
Let me come off mute. One of the things, really, BEMA is in Washington, D.C., and that's where our headquarters is. And one of the things we look at is the World Bank, the IMF, and other international organizations. Each of the ambassadors, there's one ambassador from each of the nations of Africa here. So,
I did not hear the question, Joseph. I don't know who you were speaking to.
Oh, I was speaking to everyone, but just to let you know that we're here in Washington, D.C. to go to those IMF meetings. So it was World Bank meetings, to go to those embassies and emphasize what Sheldon is working on, what others are working on to represent you within BEMA. Just so get that note out there.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, Charles, because as I've made people aware in other meetings and broadcasts before, that the Durban Declaration and Program of Action that UN passed, it specifically calls out the IMF and the World Bank and private and member states to live up to the UN's charter by financially investing and helping people of African descent. So we really appreciate the fact that you're on the ground there, going to the IMF, going to the World Bank, and assisting us with our mission that we're doing to help our community. And conversely, we're doing the same thing at the United Nations as well, in Geneva and in New York.
Yes, I know. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. We were at the point where we are giving the recommendations and the way forward. And thank you so much, Mr. Charles Sharp, for bringing that up. That is very useful to us. As we are moving to a close, which other recommendation and the way forward are we putting in place to help in engineering and moving this plan forward?
Well, I'll be happy to work with Halima to actually have a written memorandum of understanding between us so that we're all on the same page and that we move forward.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, she will have that ready in the course of the week before Friday perhaps. But we would love to have these almost immediately. So in our follow-up meetings, being that today is a Sunday, we might not be able to meet on Tuesday, but the following Tuesday we'll be able to meet. But in the course of time, we'll be comparing notes from time to time. And also we created a WhatsApp group for the civic educators. Perhaps we can mobilize people from the US and also from the continent to join that WhatsApp group so that we can be able to, to follow up on the progress and the day-to-day activities. So thank you so much. Yes.
Hey, Joseph, really quickly, I think that's wonderful to try to mobilize the people from the continent and the U.S. and around the diaspora who may need assistance with this. I'd ask Andrew to quickly mention another partner of ours that might be able to assist in this, as Lady Alicia with the Citizen Journalists.
Yes, do you handle? Yes, just I believe he's going to be coming out. He'll be coming back. Surely his internet is not serious today.
Yeah. Wait, I think there he is right there. Because I was gonna go. Yeah.
Yes, I would like to say that the Revelation Network is also, through Charles Sharp, a member of the United Nations Global Compact. We're all working together, but we do now have the ability to send to you in Kenya a mobile phone that will be tied directly into the Revelation Network. So we can actually begin to now share on a real-time basis the activities that are happening locally that we can share globally. So all we need from you is a way we can send this to you next week. And perhaps we could use this as a means to rebroadcast our activities, not just on Facebook, but also on the Revelation Network International News, of which I'm the anchor. So I will look forward to working with you on that as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. We'll be looking forward to this. I believe we'll be able to give you the address after this conversation. I think that would be useful and meaningful to all of us. Do we have any other thought that perhaps we might be leaving? Yeah. So
one question. One question. On Tuesdays, what time are you having your meetings on Tuesdays? What time of the day are your meetings on Tuesday?
Same time. 8.
Okay.
Would that be okay with your timing to the side?
Yes, perfect timing for us. 10 o'clock here, yes.
Yeah, all right, thank you so much. So on every Tuesday time, 30 minutes, at most 1 hour, just to get the feedback. And I think that would be enough to keep track of our milestones that we are achieving in this. So ladies and gentlemen, it's wonderful to have you. And perhaps I will give 1 minute to each and every one of us just to give a closing statement as we are closing this broadcast. I would start with Sir Charles Sharp. Welcome, sir.
Oh, put me on the spot. I'd like to commend you and what everyone else is doing, especially Sheldon. I don't know if you can hear me. And what you're doing with the United Nations is the key. The focus in on women and children and the issues of the family, because the family is the base for any community, the individual and the family. Anything else is secondary, and the basic needs that we need: shelter, water, and food. So I commend each and every one of you on what you're doing. Voting is an issue that we all have to deal with, and whether or not it's inclusive and that everyone is getting involved in civic government at the lowest level. Everything has to occur at the lowest level. I just wanted to get that in.
Thank you so much, and that is key. Everything got to start at the local level, and that is where Center for Africa Volunteers has its focus on. The next person that I've got to bring is Halima. Would you just give us your closing remarks?
Thank you. I'm happy to meet you all because we are having one goal, and now it is us. It's upon us to disintegrate to the next level and match the programs, because we are talking the same thing. We are in the same page, but disintegrating and matching together was the thing. I promised to Andrew that matching 365 activity to whatever they are having, I'll prepare and get to them back on Friday evening, inshallah. Thanks for your time. Thanks everything. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. And now we have Sashildo.
Yes, thank you, Josephat. Thank you, Halima. I really appreciate you having EDFU Foundation, the Conservancy Corp, on your program. I think it's really important to have a diverse panel and to have women on and be actively engaged. That's something that we seek to see more of, obviously, as well as younger people and children. Because, you know, the future, obviously, I don't want to quote like the corny, like it's not corny, but it's real. But the children are the future, right? Whitney Houston. So, yeah, we just want to thank you. We're appreciative of the work that Charles does as well, Ambassador Andrew. And we encourage you to go to our website, edfufoundation.org, theconservancycorp.org. On Facebook, check out EDFU Foundation, the 10 days of Juneteenth. And please tune in to these programs and the programs that we'll be having for the 10 days of Juneteenth, with a program of action for not just the summer, but for the future, to eliminate xenophobia, racism, social inequality in our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sheldon, for that great input. And we have Ambassador Andrew Williams Jr. Please, sir, give us your closing remarks.
Well, thank you so much. In the chat, I've placed my email address, and it is andrew.williams.jr@sagafoundationinc.org. I'm also the international chairperson for their advisory board. Saga Foundation in Nigeria has agreed to funnel all of those interested organizations into the United Nations Global Compact. And so we are working closely with them through this organization is based now, launched in Lagos, Nigeria. We have an office there. So this will be our point of contact to work together throughout Africa. As you may know, Chaplain James Mercy with the World Humanitarian Organization for Peace and Equity, HOPE, he is also our international coordinator. So I look forward to working with you, Josephat, to make sure that we can bring the Saga Foundation collaborative to all the things that we're doing. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for having tuned into today's conversation. I believe that all the panelists have added their voice to the conversation of making our world a greater place. Everybody who watched us, everybody who gave their comments, I take this opportunity to thank you, Jitani. I take this opportunity to also thank you, Margaret Ndutu. I take this opportunity to thank typically everybody who has been following this conversation. Thank you so much. We have, just to mention their names, Mr. Collins Muredi. It's been wonderful having you. Thank you so much, Franco Petra. It's been great having you. Thank you so much, Viola, for tuning in tonight. We appreciate having you in this conversation. Thank you. Let's keep going together. Let's keep the fire burning. And as rightly as it's been said this night, freedom is not free. And when we want to break free from the chains of slavery, of corruption, bad governance, then we, the people, must act. according to the first article, Article 1 of the Kenyan Constitution, we embrace and we say that all sovereign power belongs to the people. We must endeavor to ensure that our people exercise that power at any given point and at any given time to achieve good leadership. Thank you so much, and do have a good time.